This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're going to call the meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. And at this time, I will turn things over to Terry Doyle, our CAO, to give us the staff report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what I've done, I just highlighted some of the sort of the major or some of the changes that we've seen from the previous taxi policy for the town of Hawkesbury. So within definitions, we've defined more closely what a taxi business or a bona fide taxi company, we're calling them. I mean, the registered company that provides proof of business number supplied through Revenue Canada, registration of joint stock companies supplied through the province of Nova Scotia, and this registration must be valid and current. Under the driver's license application, just a small thing, but I think it's helpful that his or her signature acknowledging receipt and copy of the taxi bylaw and to abide by the said bylaw. So we're just making this bylaw more aware to those who are involved in the taxi business, both drivers and taxi business operators. We've done some work in clarifying there was really no reference to criminal record checks in our last bylaw. So we really try to define that and make it as easy to interpret as we can. So in that reference, we say that the results of criminal records of a criminal record check, including vulnerable sector verification, must be submitted every 3 years as deemed by the Chief Administrative Officer or designate. So that's a clarification. Under license restrictions, and so that goes again to this whole issue of criminal record check. So giving guidance to myself or a designate as to how to interpret the criminal record check and vulnerable sector check. So that's under paragraph 12 of the taxi bylaw. Under application refusal. So we've been through this process, and it's helped us actually create the policy. So this is similar, but just a reminder. So from our last bylaw, every person whose application for a taxi business license or taxi driver's license has been refused under section 12 shall be given notification of referral, reason for referral, and may appeal from such a refusal, suspension or revocation to council, a procedure indicated in the taxi policy. So now one of the big changes is we've taken the things out that are subject to change, as an example, fees, and we put them in policy because policy is more adaptable and more readily changeable and considered by council. So it's a quicker turnaround if we want to review fees and insurance requirements and some of the things that can change as our society and our laws change, inflation and those types of things. Holders of a taxi business license shall be required to. So here again, upon request of the Chief Administrative Officer or designate, make vehicles available. So this is about inspections available within 7 days of the request for a complete motor vehicle inspection. On request of said motor vehicle inspection will be carried out by a motor vehicle inspector, but for the province of Nova Scotia or an approved inspection station to be determined by the Chief Administrative Officer or designate. The holder of the taxi business license shall pay for the cost of the inspection. So there can be, in a number of towns especially will do this, so they'll call in a certain number of cars and ask for them to have an inspection through the year, or go to a inspection station and do that. What we've done in the past and what's in this, what's in the bylaw is here, make each licensed vehicle available for inspection by the Chief Administrative Officer or designate or the town at such a time as the Chief Administration Officer or designate shall direct and ensure compliance within 17B and D. Yeah, so what we've done in the past is we worked with motor vehicle compliance, and they set up an inspection station actually in our public works garage, and we've sent notices to both taxi companies, businesses, and asked them to have their cars there at certain times. Blaise McCacken actually from town actually runs that department now and has set that up for us, and that's worked very, very well for us. So so that's ingrained now. It's easier for us to do that. It's ingrained in policy. Another item. Again, it goes back to the appeal process. So, Chief Administrative Officer or designate may give a warning or suspension or suspend a taxi license, or may revoke the taxi driver license granted under this bylaw for any of the following: that the holder of the driver's license has since the date of issue thereof been convicted of an offense as described in section 12, that the holder of a taxi driver license has since the date of issue thereof been charged with an offense as described under section 12, and failure to comply with this or failure to comply with other requirements of the bylaw. So if there's a taxi driver, taxi business, the CAO or the designate has the ability to suspend or revoke the licenses. However, it does go back to the right of appeal, and so paragraph 23 talks about the right of appeal, and as we had that experience with an application. So we have the application. If there's an application denied, either as a taxi business owner or a taxi driver, if there's a refusal to license, or if a license is suspended or removed, then that person is allowed to appeal to the council. So that's ingrained there, and that appeal process is described in policy. And this is just for administrative purposes to help us through another process. Within this bylaw, we said the Town of Port Hawkesbury bylaw and amendments thereto, as now in effect, is repealed upon the coming forth of this bylaw, and all amendments thereto as hereby repealed. So we don't have to go through repeal process for the existing taxi bylaw. So that's the taxi bylaw. The other thing I forgot to highlight, thinking off as we're talking, the other thing that's clear in this bylaw is we say that number of taxi business licenses shall not be restricted. New applications for taxi business licenses shall be submitted to the Chief Administrative Officer or designate, and he/C will either approve or reject such an application. So when we had an application for taxi business license prior to this, I certainly had I had to really look to see, is there another taxi business required? Is that, will council automatically accept an application if it fulfills the requirement of the bylaw? But this is clear in the bylaw that we're not looking at the marketplace, we're not looking at business pressures. We're saying that if there's a taxi business license that fulfills the requirements of the bylaw, they will be licensed. So that is, it makes it clear, same decision that we made when we had the last application, but it's clear in bylaw now. So maybe just a couple of things on policy. So as I mentioned, one of the reasons we want a policy is to take those things out of policy that are subject to change, like fees. fees and fares and those types of things should never be part of bylaw because they're always kind of subject to change in market and a number of issues. So one of the first things we have is the taxi policy fee table. So we have a taxi driver's license, and that's $30 for the driver. So that's up from 15. And then a taxi owner's license or business license, and that's $30, and that's per vehicle. And the reason that we look at this in more depth, one of the reasons is fares. Fares within town limits, there would be a flat rate of $7. So that's up from our last bylaw of $5. So those are the changes there. We went through and we created an appeal process from the last appeal that we had under the previous bylaw. So we've repeated that procedure in the policy that we developed for that case. And the process to be utilized by council when appealing the decision of the inspector is made. So that's the process that you went through, confirming the decision of the inspector, ordering that a license be granted, requesting more information from staff, hold a special hearing. These are the outcomes. Or the applicant will be informed the decision, and the applicant will be informed the decision is within 7 days of decision. So if you don't have enough information in writing, or you still don't have enough information after you've requested more information, you have this procedure is to hold a hearing, and that's the agenda for the hearing, and the sort of the remainder of that procedure around the appeal process. We've put insurance requirements because insurance requirements are subject to change with that industry. And we've indicated the licensing requirements because we have seen some changes in license requirements fairly lately, especially during COVID with some increased demand in specifically in HRM around licensing requirements. So that's something that can be changed more efficiently through policy than bylaw. So the other thing that we've done is we've updated the application process. So the application process is now easier to follow and easier to screen when we get this in. So when Aileen takes her information in, it's easier for her to see that everything is there and the person meets the requirements. We also made it upgraded. So we have things like emails and mobile phone numbers, which were never there before. And we've taken it out of bylaw. So something like a form should never be in a bylaw because, again, as technology changes, any number of things change that should be part of that. One of the things we've added is business registration. So that taxi business is going to be required to show their business number from CRA and their Nova Scotia Registry of Joint Stocks number. And then there's the list of items that have to be associated with that application. On the taxi driver license, something similar, we just updated the information that we need, and they are certifying when signing the document that they have enclosed the correct attachments, and that they hold the license, and that they have and they have the fees. This is the taxi business license. It's fairly straightforward, and the taxi driver license form. So, Your Worship, I'd ask for any questions from my summary of the bylaw and the associated policy that with information that had been removed from or items that had been removed from the previous bylaw.
Thanks, Terry, for that presentation. And just before I open up the floor for any questions or discussion pieces, just wanted to note that this is the second reading of the taxi bylaw. The first reading to amend this bylaw was held at a public meeting on December 7th, 2021. And also want to make a quick note that Deputy Mayor O'Coin has declared a conflict, which is why he's absent from this meeting. So with that, does anyone have any questions for Terry at this time? Okay.
Just
Go
a
ahead.
comment, Your Worship.
Sure, go ahead, Councillor McDougall.
I'm just wondering, who's the inspector, did you say, Terry?
So motor vehicle compliance. So that's the the government
No, I know
officials.
it is, but just the
network
name,
from
you
TIR.
mentioned the name there.
Yeah. Blaze McCaffrey.
I'm not sure it's McCackman, is it? Isn't it Blaze Campbell or Cameron?
No, you're right. It is Blaze Cameron. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. Terry, in Article 17, F and H, cause to have displayed on each licensed vehicle roof a sign bearing the word taxi or name of taxi company, which shall be illuminated after dark and clearly visible at all times from a distance of 200 feet. And H, display the company name on both sides of the vehicle. If we adopt the bylaw, is there a grace period for them to comply with having those signs and the company name on both sides of the vehicle?
That's a good question, Councillor MacGyver. Over to you, Terry.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So the taxis are being licensed now under the old bylaw because it's up at the 31st of January. So they'll receive their licenses under the old bylaw. But yes, certainly we'll make it known that there is a grace period for that process. I appreciate the comment.
Thank you.
Do you have any other follow-up questions, Councillor McDougall or Councillor MacGyver?
No, I don't, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor McCrory, do you have any questions at this time?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Terry. Terry, the fees, I would imagine they were established as a result of a canvass of other municipalities. Is that correct? Would they be comparable fees in other municipal units?
Yeah, no, that's right, Councillor McCrory. So we've looked at the some of the rural municipalities that just don't change, but the town of Antigonish and town of Pictou and Glasgow, that's where their fees are at. So it's almost identical, if not identical.
Great, thank you, Terry. Thanks.
Any follow-up questions, Councillor McCrory?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, so it appears that council have asked all the questions that they have at this time, Terry. So we'll move on to gallery presentations. So at this time, I will call for any opposing presentations. And I have to do so 3 times. So for a second time, I will call for opposing presentations. And for a third and final time, I'll call for opposing presentations. Hearing none, I would call for any presentations in favor. And a second time for a call for presentations in favor. And a third and final call for presentations in favor. Without any presentations, Terry, I would ask if there's any written submissions at this time.
There are no written submissions at this time.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate council's time this evening. I would ask at this time for a motion of adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Councillor McCrory. Do we have a seconder?
Seconded, Your Worship.
Seconded by Councillor McDougall. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Contrary minded? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. See you all over at the public meeting.
Thank you.